from Chicago once again. It's Katy, Hogan, and Michael James with Live from the Heartland. This is actually number 86 of Heartland at Home during the time of the pandemic. And we encourage you to listen carefully, to take the chain from the brain, to be ready to get into the people's game. We've got a couple of great guests, our own pro extraordinaire media man, Tom Clark, and Democratic Committee woman and State Rep Kelly Cassidy. They're going to hip us to what's going on in respective areas, and we look forward to having them visit. So good morning to you, Katy Hogan. Let's roll. Let's start with you sharing a little bit of good information from your end of the world.
Well, the good news from me is I get to go out of the country this week. I'm going to Cancun, Mexico. Even though I've been to Mexico almost a dozen times, I have never ever been to the honky area known as Cancun. And what I'm going for is Girls Just Wanna, this great rock and roll music fest in Cancun, run by Brandi Carlile. This will be the third one. She had to take last year off because of the pandemic, but I'm going with 3 girlfriends and I know I'm gonna have fun. How about you? You got any good news?
Well, I was in Cancun back in '77, sleeping in a barracks while
it doesn't matter. What's your current good news memory?
The good news is that you're going to go to Cancun, and I am forced to learn how to use Zoom for next week's show. So wish me a lot of luck, and hopefully you'll be a guest there, sitting on the playa over there on the beach, living it up with a cocktail in your hand, and you're tuned in on your phone. We'll see how that goes.
We will. And maybe all the rest of you will too. So what do we got in the way of news? You talked to me about some Irish fishermen. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, I was watching Rachel Maddow this week, and I saw a report on fiber optic cables being cut under the sea near Donegal, Ireland, and there was a Russian boat. And then she added that there was going to be Russian naval games right near the coast in Irish fishing waters. And a group of 60 boats were Irish fishermen planning to show up and peacefully try to prevent that, to confront the Russian Navy and their war games.
My people.
When I looked it up today to see, well, actually yesterday, to see what was going on, the headline in the Irish paper was, Putin backs down, Russia agrees to buffer zone with Ireland after fishermen row.
Huh. I love that. I love that news. Russia seems to be saber rattling on every front they possibly can. I'm not really sure what they hope to gain from it, but
well, we got to figure out who our Russia expert is and bring him on soon, because it's complicated. I mean, what's going on with all of the European countries and Russia delivering gas, and and there's just a lot going on that we will try to sort out as we grasp it.
The other big news that we got this week was finally we got word that the Supreme Court Justice Breyer is announcing his retirement, right?
He is, yes.
And so what do you got on that?
Well, I got that one of the things I thought was interesting is, like, there are 3 women being talked about, and Mitch McConnell already is saying no radical candidate. So I'm not sure who's he talking about, but Jacobin magazine had this quote that I'm going to read, said, "This moment begs for a jurist whose life experience and record shows a commitment to prioritizing American workers and the environment and breaking with the most powerful lobbying group in America, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce." So just keep in mind that hopefully one of them is kind of radical or progressive. And it seems like a good thing that we're going to have a new Supreme Court person in position. Hopefully there'll be more down the line. And over on the Progressive PAC Kickstart search for challengers to Manchin and Simna, one is Congressman Ruben Gallego in Arizona. And he, like all the other prospective candidates in 2024, who might run against Sinema, all of them are
22 this year.
No, she's not running till 24.
Oh, she's not up this year.
And all of the potential candidates right now in polling seem to be ahead of her.
Okay.
It's complicated. I don't get her very much.
Well, yeah, you told us a lot of things there. I think the most interesting thing in that was, one, I wanted to point out that McConnell has a very bad record in my book on Supreme Court justices for the last few years. And I really hope he gets his comeuppance with this particular one. And Jacobin magazine is not one that any of the Republicans ever read. So them talking about wanting a progressive on Supreme Court is them being,
Yeah, I just threw it in there. I threw it in because it's something I now will think about and sort of talk about in conversation.
No, but what I liked about it was the pointing out that the most powerful lobbying group, according to them, is the Chamber of Commerce. And I think it's right to point out that the Chamber of Commerce is way more powerful than it should be in U.S. politics, and people could use to pay attention to it. So that was a good piece.
How about a Reefer Report?
You give the Reefer Report. You're the Reefer Report guy.
Okay, so the latest report is, and I'll repeat what we talked about, I think we talked about it recently, was how a red state, Oklahoma, is probably now one of the largest producers of marijuana. And
not producers, growers, right?
Growers, yes.
Yeah.
And on that front, Forbes magazine reported in November that Democrats are no longer alone in the attempt to legalize marijuana at the federal level. Apparently, there's a Democratic bill, but now there's also a Republican bill by a woman out of a rep from South Carolina who is pushing for pot legalization on the national level. And just an interesting thing to note, in Louisiana, where Senate candidate Democrat Gary Chambers, he's running ads where he's smoking a blunt in the ads and talking about the importance of legalizing marijuana. And he relates it to race and, who gets locked up, all those kind of things.
Not sure
I'm
about
rooting for Gary Chambers in Louisiana.
But you don't vote in Louisiana. I wonder what that'll work for, how that'll work for them.
Well, we'll see. They do have a Democratic governor,
Yeah, I do know. Let's see. What do we got on COVID? COVID, we're not going to talk about much. It's we've got our fingers crossed. It seems to be Omicron seems to be leveling out, plateauing out, but I don't want to speak too soon. I heard were talking to me about Neil Young. Will you?
Yeah, there's like a culture war thing going on between Neil Young and Joe Rogan, both on Spotify. And Rogan is the largest podcaster audience. While Neil Young has plenty of other formats, Joe Rogan is only on Spotify. But Neil Young basically said because Joe Rogan is pushing incorrect information, saying that young people in good health don't need to get vaccinated, he said either get him off or have him change, or I'm pulling my stuff. And he did. And Spotify, went with Rogan because it's bigger, and their format is more than just music. So they have other podcasts that they're concerned with. But it doesn't look like a lot of other people are going to join in. Michelle Obama has a podcast on Spotify, but I don't think she's going to pull it. But I respect Neil Young for what he did, and I'm going to listen to more of his music, both on my records and maybe on some other formats. So there.
Okay, I'm hoping that our guest has the right, Zoom address for this meeting. We're going to have to check on that. We might go off for a minute to check that. But JB Pritzker here in Illinois has got ads up, so he's clearly interested in keeping his job. And this past week, those ads were joined by the Republican-backed candidate, Aurora's mayor. What's his name?
I think it's Irvin, but I'm not sure. I'll look it up while we're.
Yeah, he's backed by Ken Griffith, and his main pitch in his ads is that he saved Aurora from the rioters. He took a tough line on the rioters. I don't think that's going to fly.
He's also accused by other Republicans on the right of being really a Democrat, but I think we don't really want him to be a Democrat. He can be a Republican.
Well, he can be what he wants. All right, we're gonna take a little break here in this winter wonderland of Chicago.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. You are listening to WOW 88.7. You're listening to Live from the Heartland show. Our next guest is going to be Tom Clark, our media landscape reporter guy. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland here for the 29th of January, actually for the week of January 29th. And we're really glad to have our old friend Tom Clark here. He's our media landscape reporter guy. And thanks for coming in with Jimmy Brown, the newsboy, Carl Smith. It's a great little tune. I always like it. It's ringing in my head all the time. It's from an earlier day.
Only you, Michael, only you. I don't know when what year was that recording from, by the way?
Oh, it's been around for hundreds of years. It's back from an earlier day in the media when people had newsprint to read in the morning, and they got it from people standing on corners, walking around, selling it. It's a different format these days. And one of the reasons we've got Tom is to fill us in on what's going on in Chicago. Initially,
Hi, Tom. Hi, Tom. Welcome
Hi, Katy. Love your archival shirt. It's great to see those old logos come back out to play.
Oh, it's never gone away.
Exactly.
Tom,
The
one
logo
of the
that works.
reasons we got you coming on, Tom, is because there's been a lot of talk about WBEZ merging, taking over. I'm not sure how it is, the Sun Times. And the Sun Times, as we know, has gotten thinner and thinner. And fill us in what's happening on that particular issue, and then we'll broaden it out to talk about media in general.
So, Daddy, what's a newspaper? Might be another way to frame this, because the newsprint part of this is sort of secondary to what's happening in the media landscape, which, amongst other things, is venture capitalists, beginning with Sam Zell at the Tribune and now at the Alden Company, really stripping bare the journalistic integrity of admittedly a conservative right of center paper, which the Tribune is even worse than the Sun Times. I don't even get it most of the week now because it's not worth it. It's mostly AP wire copy and stuff from yesterday. You can't get late sports anymore in the Tribune newspaper because they changed all their print runs to save money. But bringing us back to the Sun Times BEZ merger, the Sun Times has been in even worse shape financially until labor and other philanthropists began to bail it out 3 or 4 years ago. There's several storied figures in the middle of that, Edwin Eisendrath being one big name who's still sort of around. But in the shifting gears of the media landscape, which my former organization was chronicling back in 2009 and 2012, we were looking at the movement of news online and the diversification of media outlets, including many small neighborhood blogs and other things like that. Well, that industry has evolved. And in the course of that, our public radio station has become a journalistic juggernaut. It has, next to the Tribune until it began shrinking, and now the Sun Times, it's grown. Membership base, philanthropic dollars. It has moved forward with a very bold plan to buy the Sun Times for $1. And with a number of funding commitments lined up, they hope to make a merger of a broadcast and print newsroom, help both survive and do better journalism. That's the goal. There are lots of questions about what this will do with the current media landscape, including the fact that a lot of other journalistic outlets have been moving to the nonprofit model since the advertising model for media has basically fallen apart with the internet. And we're still trying to figure out where all that revenue is going to come from to pay journalists to do good reporting.
Where is it going to come from? I mean, that's a really good question. How do these things stay afloat?
Well, it's hard to talk about this without really getting into the weeds. So I will try to keep it more general.
Yeah, thank you.
Part of the problem with newspapers in general is what they call legacy costs. So one reason why you saw all those Tribune columnists leave a few months ago when the new owners took over is that they represent a lot of embedded high figure for journalists' salaries, benefits, long-term health and pension obligations, notwithstanding other embedded costs in running a printing plant, finding paper in Canada, etc. It's just a massive operation, and it worked for a long time because Marshall Fields was willing to buy a page 3 ad every day of the week, 365 days of the year, and sometimes Sunday supplements. And that kind of advertising supported the whole enterprise. You don't have a Marshall Fields anymore. In fact, you don't even have retailers in general much anymore, and they're certainly not advertising in newspapers. They are trying to figure out how to use Facebook, Instagram, and things like that to sell their stuff. So where journalism comes in a democracy is another whole issue, and it's not something venture capitalists or old legacy media outlets are particularly concerned about anymore, unless they have a rich owner like the New York Times or the Washington Post. And so you have those two national, and I'll throw in the Wall Street Journal. Those are heavily funded national publications that actually don't survive particularly on their subscription revenues, and not so much anymore on advertising. They are using a variety of other revenue streams, including selling coffee cups. So I think it's that public media model that is now being expanded, and at least the Sun-Times and the BEZ hopes it presents a better product. The weeds part of this is the funding.
I thought we weren't going there.
Well, okay.
No, you can go there, but
You
let
can
me
go
ask
there.
you,
You can go
before
there.
you talk about the funding, I'm going to lead into that. One of the things that I got back and forth with you was the Reader, which is now run by Tracy Baim. She is concerned about the where the money is going to come from now. If this new merger is a not-for-profit, is that going to suck up the money that has allowed other papers and media outlets such as the Reader, which she turned into a not-for-profit? What's it mean for her and for a block club, those kind of operations?
It's an excellent question, because that's the big sucking sound concern that those of us who have been running nonprofit media outlets have. When the McCormick Foundation, formerly the McCormick Tribune Foundation, moved more heavily into journalism, we once received funding from that foundation. They were supporting upwards of 50 newsrooms, many very small ones, startups around the country, but primarily here in Chicago. With their big announcement recently of a multi-year huge grant to the Better Government Association to beef up their journalism efforts, they also announced that they're dropping from 50 to 5 grantees in the journalism program. So the big guys may benefit as they move into a nonprofit ownership model. The small folks who've been doing it for a while maybe get squeezed out. So I think if I were Tracy Baim or Daryl Holliday at City Bureau on the South Side out of the Invisible Institute, we've had Jamie Calvin on in the past. Those are folks that have kind of broken the ice on figuring out how to make nonprofit news happen. And now the biggies are coming along and picking up a lot of the loose change, or shall we say new money that suddenly has become available. One of the intriguing things about the merger is that the new corporate entity that controls the Sun-Times includes a staff member of the MacArthur Foundation, which is funding this effort. So one begins to raise questions of transparency if your owner is also on the board. But of course, newspapers have always had that issue of separation between the journalistic product and the editorial board.
I just want to inject here while you're, so that people understand. When you said we got funding from them once, you were referring to your former outfit, right?
Correct. The Community Media Workshop.
I just want to let everybody know that Live from the Heartland does not receive any grants yet whatsoever, but we'd love to.
We're looking for an intern who part of the job will be getting those grants and then get paid.
Right. But back to what you were saying, the tricky part about the not-for-profit versus and in place of the objectivity, the previous assumed objectivity of the news media. I'm interested too, because we reported on the Block Club receiving what, a huge, like what, $1.6 million from the American Journalism Project a couple weeks ago to
Very
expand.
exciting news. Very
It really
exciting.
is.
Well deserved.
Tom, can you talk a little bit about Block Club? Because some of our listeners and viewers may not know that there once was a thing called DNA, and they tried to unionize, and it was owned by Ricketts. So one of the Ricketts family, who also owns the Cubs, and one of them is like a governor of Nebraska, is when they tried to unionize, they shut it down. And Block Club emerged after that. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, Bezos could decide that he's bored with the Washington Post and walk away. That's the problem when you have a sole source funder like that. Whether it was a union fight or just he got bored, the Rickett out of New York, who actually started DNA Info in New York and then it spread here to Chicago, folded one day, literally with no notice. It shut down.
Right.
But here in Chicago, the group that had worked for DNA Info did not want to give up on a fight, and they formed a nonprofit, Block Club News, and it has taken off because they are doing excellent, hyper-local, weekly news reporting, I'll call it. It's taking the place of the community weekly that we used to get, like Lerner.
Right.
We don't have anything like that really anymore. I don't consider the News Star, which reprints press releases, to be much of a newspaper. God bless them for, printing the police blotter every week you can get at Morris Market. But beyond that, it's not what we remember was a twice a week Lerner newspaper.
It's also really, really bent.
Oh, it's very right wing.
Oh my God. And our old friend who went to seminary with you, I won't mention his name, but it annoys me every week to read his stuff. Go ahead. As you were.
Which paper are you talking
No,
about?
we're talking about the
News
freebie,
Star, it's at the Morris.
Oh, yeah.
the freebie that you can pick up.
It used to be part of the Lerner was kind of liberal in the old days.
Well,
Well, Lerner's long gone, and
Long
Greg
gone.
Hines moved on to Cranes. Where he
Let me-
also tends to be a bit more right of center than he used to be, but it's the nature of growing up, right? Or getting older or something. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, Cranes became also moved in this, media world shakeup. Cranes to me became something that did more news, neighborhood news, than it ever did before, more city news. Was that your perception too, Tom? I'm talking about in the last like 3 or 4 years. So
I agree.
yeah,
Because I think they're scrambling as well for audience and trying to figure out how to find them and keep them engaged.
exactly.
I had actually dropped my charter subscription. I had always felt Cranes was an overlooked resource when it came to nonprofit news because they had reporters willing to cover your stuff if you were creative enough to think of a business angle. They were desperate for copy, and if you gave it to them first, you had good chances of getting a story.
Mhm.
And with the online presence, there are many opportunities for op-eds and other kind of public policy think pieces, as often in Cranes as there ever was in the Sun-Times or the Tribune. So, and Cranes is a privately held company, a family business
Right.
that apparently is breaking even because they're still around, although I suspect their editorial staff is a little smaller than it was 15, 20 years ago. It still is producing an incredibly credible product. And they're doing it, at least for me, on the basis of a $15 a month online subscription.
Well, that's it. They actually smoothly moved into an online platform. I've got people have 2 or 3 or 4 different possibilities of versions of Cranes that they can get in their email inbox every day. So I think they've probably done a pretty good job of adjusting that way. You have a question, Michael?
Well, I was gonna ask, where do you think most people get the news? And I'm particularly concerned about how young people get news. And I'm wondering about radio and TV and maybe your take on, I watch plenty of CNN and MSNBC, also watch public broadcasting. I listen to, radio to get news. What about the news outlets on like TV and radio operations?
Surveys suggest, and this has been true for a couple of decades now, that 60% or more of Americans get their news from TV news. Now that's scary because for the most part, that's like Channel 7, Channel 9 type local news. And while I think Channel 9 puts out a very credible effort, I can't believe that Channel 11 is the top news program in town. They just miss stuff. And, you know, when you, in a half hour, 10 o'clock news program, spend at least 12 minutes on sports and weather, you know how much time is left for news, particularly when the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes is all police blotter, as it was last night. We didn't get to, what was the major news story yesterday? I don't want to date the show here, but major national news didn't get covered until 15 minutes into the news program last night, because there was what? The carjacking to cover, the shooting in Ravenswood. I mean, all sorts of, you know, really important police news. Not. But to your original question, I think most people are still getting their information from TV, unfortunately, because there's not a lot there. I think younger people are primarily getting their news from peers through social media. And that can be all sorts of different sources, from the latest crackpot that got set up by a right-wing Russian bot to very credible news outlets desperately trying to get, like The Intercept or Truth Out or others, those precious membership dollars to keep publishing tomorrow. So it's a constant struggle for readers in this social media environment. Readers come and go very quickly. I think another phenomenon, and the pandemic has maybe contributed to this, is that we've all ended up with much shorter attention spans. So the idea of reading a newspaper story that jumps inside is beyond most people's pale. They don't have patience or time for that anymore. They want a USA Today quick 2 or 3 headlines and they're done before they go back to their Wordle for the day. I can't believe how much time is being spent on Wordle. And people are, I don't fault that. I love Spelling Bee, which I do every day. And I make sure I do my New York Times weekly quiz every Friday. Didn't do so good today, but
Yesterday.
I think one of the real questions, which another commentator on the Sun-Times BEZ merger has asked, is what is the important journalism we want to support? And will people really keep buying or pay a membership or make a donation to a place that they used to get horoscopes, comics, and TV listings? It's a different kind of thing. The daily newspaper was this interesting kind of public square. We know a lot of voices were missing from that public square, but nonetheless, it was sort of a convenient place where conventional wisdom could develop. We don't have that same kind of platform today. It's much more diversified, for better or for worse. Yes, Katie.
Speaking of public square, that's another source of news for us locally. Rate them in your scheme of getting news locally and beyond. How do you feel?
In my mind, the most important reads every morning for me is Axial Chicago, Political Illinois. They both come out around 6 a.m. in the morning. You'll get a Crane's feed about that time. Both newspapers have a feed just before then. And then literally around 10:04 a.m. every morning comes Chicago Public Square. Chicago Public Square is an aggregator. It is the best place to find everyone else's headlines all in one place. And it's done with Charlie Meyerson's particularly often humorous, but certainly contextually real reporting. There's always a little bit of an edge, though it's presented pretty much down the middle about what's going on around town and the world, summarized in a very convenient to read, like 3 minutes. And you have covered virtually all the media landscape, at least as Charlie Meyerson sees it.
Yeah, I really like Public Square.
And then newer on the scene is Justin Kaufman and Monica Eng's effort. That's part of the growing national nonprofit Axios. Actually, Axios is a blended media outlet. Let's not talk about their ownership structure. It'd be another going into the weeds. But Axios itself is a fascinating national media outlet, all online. They have substantial funding, and they have started regional city bureaus, one of which is now in Chicago. It's a lighter read than Charlie's, but it's a very, they break news. They have news this morning about measuring poop for COVID.
Yeah.
And they have all the gory details.
One paper that we didn't mention, or one news outlet, it's on an international level, is Al Jazeera. And I find them pretty interesting. And I have this new smart TV that I got from Father's Day. And I can actually watch both Reuters and Al Jazeera with all these short little stories, It's pretty good.
We're about out of time with Tom, so I want to ask Tom if he would like to, in summation, talk about maybe how you feel public engagement with news has improved, and your best hopes for people getting more information. I know that's a broad question, but have at it.
Well, what comes to mind when you raise that is what I think is an ongoing desperate need for civic and media literacy education.
Yeah.
With the diversification of information sources, evaluating who's truthier than others, I think is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. And I think it's something that needs to be taught, because the bots are too clever in covering up their real agenda, whether it's right, left, or something else, selling you widgets. Clicking through on a Facebook ad is one of the worst things you can ever do, except we all, at one time or another, have done it because they're very good at attracting our eyes.
Right.
And I think that's probably the major challenge going forward, is training our eyes to look for truth rather than just what entertains.
Excellent. That's an excellent rundown of that. Thank you. I appreciate it. Tom, it's so nice to see your face. People just tuning in might think, oh, Tom's back. And he is. He never really went away. He's just a few blocks over there, but he is engaged in other things. And so right before we leave, is there anything you want to say about the status of the Chicago Reporter, or is that not for another time?
No, we can talk about that another time in more depth, but we Friends of the Chicago Reporter are planning a big reunion July 21st at the to be opened Bronzeville Winery. We are very excited about the program we're putting together. There'll be some other events that night, and we hope by that time we will have our own big announcement about the next version of race reporting in Chicago, which disappeared a year ago when the Reporter went on hiatus.
Excellent news. Always, Tom, the newsman. Thank you so much for making time with us this morning. It's great to see you.
Take care. Be good.
Peace out.
We'll be right back with more live from the Heartland here on WLUW 88.7 Chicago.
Representative Kelly Cassidy, who also serves as the 49th Ward Democratic Committee person, will convene the local party endorsement session this afternoon, Saturday, January 29th. So we just thought it would be good to help people understand things. If we asked Kelly to join us, we did report on your signature gathering exploits over the last 2 weekends and invited people to join in that. And how about explaining what we're looking at, what we're facing with this upcoming primary, for starters? And hi.
Sure. Well, I mean, hi. First of all, we're just in a completely different stance than we've ever been. We've moved our primary to June. We started petition gathering in January, which is usually it's September for petitions, and March for our primary. So folks are already just a little off rhythm. And making sure that that added layer of making sure voters know what we've done, and that they know that we've got an election coming up in June, is going to be huge. So, we start from that, then we add a layer because this is a redistricting year. So the entire House and Senate of the General Assembly are up for reelection. The governor's up for reelection, all of the statewide officers, half of the county officers. So it's going to be a more crowded ballot than in past years. And in other parts of the state, there's brand new judicial subcircuits. Our judicial subcircuits are staying the same for this cycle. But in other parts of the state, folks are, having to get used to new boundaries with that as well. And then we've got, for the first time in decades, the state Supreme Court districts have been remapped. This is the one I lose sleep over. Honestly, folks aren't used to these boundaries. Folks aren't used to Supreme Court justices necessarily. I don't think it's top of mind that we elect them in Illinois. But the reality is we can't afford to lose a seat on our state Supreme Court because we've already lost the U.S. Supreme Court. And most of the things that we pass here get challenged in state court first. And so, I think about things like the conversion therapy ban that was immediately challenged. But that case was immediately dismissed because of the makeup of our Supreme Court. If we lose one of these seats, things like that could be at risk.
Having grown up in Chicago, we used to call it a one-party state. All right. Now, as a result of the recent redistricting, we have the specters of Dems primarying one another. Very frustrating for those of us who worked for, say, both candidates now running against one another in the 6th congressional district. We got Sean Casten, who a lot of us put a lot of energy into having him beat, what's his name? The former Republican. Roscom, yeah. And now a woman who we also put a lot of energy into electing, Marie Newman, they wind up in the same district. And any thoughts on how to approach that? I mean, you're going to be probably, well, you don't have that in the endorsement session because it's not our district, but
right, it's not in our district. But personally, it's an issue. I supported both of them, and was an early supporter of Representative Newman. And so, it's very frustrating that, time and energy and resources, volunteers and cash are all going to go into this race when we really need to be focusing on maintaining these seats and protecting them as Democratic seats. Both, not only those two members, but if you think about so much of the progress we've made as a state has been in that segment, in that suburban area, where we flipped a ton of seats in the House and Senate here. So having that battle wage there takes away from the energy that needs to go into protecting those seats as well, I fear. So, this is not going to be a great election year for us as Democrats. Historically, that's the way it is in a midterm. And so, I have a lot of concerns about, what that matchup might end up doing to our, what sort of trickle down effect there might be in some of these seats, all of my DuPage sisters, whether we're talking about Tara Costa Howard or Deb Conroy's running for county board chair there. But a lot of these women that, were quite frankly, I get all the credit for passing RHA, but the truth is it was those suburban women who came in the 2018 election who forced that vote. And
tell people what
each
RHA,
one of them are critically important.
Remind people what
the Reproductive Health Act.
Yeah.
So the Reproductive Health Act is the law that really built a firewall around Illinois to protect abortion rights.
Is this matchup because we lost in the census and we've had to lose one seat, or is it something else that makes it happen? I mean,
maybe a bit of both. Because we did lose a seat, but we also combined some Republicans as well. So it was a combination of losing a seat and the population shift that led to a new Latino district. I think that's just, you both have heard me use my Jell-O mold analogy, right? You poke it over here, it wiggles over here. So everything you do on a map has impacts in other districts. And I think that this is a piece of that.
Can I ask you, okay, there's a slating process that most voters don't really lock into until long after, and it's too late because it doesn't matter then. It's the party's process for putting candidates on the ballot. And I was kind of shocked about hearing about this loyalty pledge that our formerly endorsed guy, what's his name, Jacob Kaplan, who is now the president of the party statewide, or what's his?
So he's the executive director of the party. Tony Preckwinkle is the chair of the party.
Thank you. All right. So he was quoted as announcing this loyalty pledge at the time of slating. And we did note it on this program and wondered at the time if we're returning to the bad old days of Cook County Democratic Party politics. Do you have any reaction to that?
Well, I reacted pretty violently the minute it happened. And I will say Jacob is staff to the committee, to the party. This was actually the executive committee of the Cook County Democrats that made this decision without consulting any of us as committee people. It was not a democratically conducted policy decision, frankly.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And I went to great lengths to communicate with all of the candidates that not signing that pledge would not impact the decision of the Democratic Party of the 49th Ward. In terms of our endorsement process. We do not historically always follow the Cook County slate. We participate in slating, but we make our own decisions because we are a membership-driven organization. I get the same one vote that every other member of our organization gets on endorsements. So even if I've personally endorsed someone, that's not a guarantee that the party that our organization is going to end up endorsing that candidate. So, and that makes us different. And it actually has been a source of, the need to do some explaining to candidates that you still want to come and try to get our endorsement, even if I've endorsed someone else. Mm-hmm. Come at me, right? Get my organization to go against me. That's fine. Okay. But, we take that very, very seriously as an organization. And so when the county party launched this BS loyalty oath, I was furious.
Kelly, let me ask you about you. In your experience, what motivates voters the most? Candidates' personal appeal, ads on TV, endorsements by groups that they trust, getting their door knocked on. Talk about that a little bit. Because we've got a lot of people in the country, we got to move in a good direction.
Yeah, I mean, usually, and in particular now, I think that, with so much mistrust in government, that trusted source thing is hugely important. Pre-COVID, I would say the personal touch by the candidate, right? And actually, when you're in campaign speak, you sort of track touches, right? How many contacts have you had? How many touches have you had on a voter? And, it's a little different now because it's much harder to have that one-on-one interaction. People aren't opening doors. People aren't, going out to forums and things like that. So we've got to get a little bit more creative. And sort of like what we're doing with petitions, whether it's, having these outdoor parties. The other thing that a lot of folks are doing, and we're doing as well, is not asking people to get a ton of signatures, right? Asking a lot more people to get fewer signatures so that you're only contacting the people that you're already in contact with. Because we don't want to put our volunteers and supporters in harm's way either. So I think that campaigning is going to kind of have to be a similar adaptation, especially if we see another variant or another surge that's going to make it harder to get folks to gather in person or to, answer the doors. What I'm hearing from folks who are out on the doors right now is you get a lot of people yelling through the window, "I have COVID," so they don't have to open the door.
Wow. This signature gathering it's going to be interesting to see how this works. We did, like I said, make note of your outdoor petition signing for the last 2 weekends. And I think that's a good creative way. Generally, I mean, historically, the 49th Ward has run highly participated in endorsement sessions. of course, that was easier to do when we would all go to the park field house, drink coffee, eat donuts together, and watch our fellow Dems in the neighborhood react to
I
various
cannot wait to
candidates.
drink lukewarm coffee and eat stale donuts with y'all.
I know, I hear you. But I mean, the in-person thing, I mean, when you think about it, like dear Helen Carlock would ask the same question of every candidate running for MWRD to make sure that we would get, you know,
Metropolitan water.
right. Thank you, Michael. So how do you help our voters, for example, know about one of the trickier things, which you referred to, the judge candidates, which used to be one of the things that we did really well in the 49th Ward. We'd have, you know, an extra session basically for the judges. And you and I both know.
And that's exactly, we're still doing that. We're still doing that. So today's session, sorry, I can't remember what day it is. Today's session is going to be about, the statewide officers, the countywide officers, everyone but judges, basically. And then we do the judges separately because, as you said, like it's something that we're really committed to. You know, if we're going to elect judges, which I hate, we should do so in a way that people have the capacity to make an informed decision. Exactly. And so we will do a separate one. Maybe we'll be able to be in person by then, because we tend to hold off on that until all of the judicial evaluations are in. And that tends to be in another few weeks. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. But you know, what we've done over the last few months now in lieu of the ability to gather in person is for our monthly meetings, we have been trying to spotlight candidates or spotlight races to give folks a chance to have a little more time than, you know, tomorrow it's going to be 5 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes of questions at best. So it's still not a lot. And so, you know, making sure that, you know, we had a good deep dive with all of the people who were running for Secretary of State, everybody who was running for sheriff, like giving the folks that opportunity to come but to do it virtually. And we've had great participation in our virtual events. You know, it's actually something that we need to figure out an effective way to always have a virtual component. Because for a lot of our folks, they're liking it.
Yeah. Speaking of being effective, the 2022 midterms hold great significance all over the nation. What do you think is the best way for Illinois voters to assist with results in other states? I'm not so sure that the situation is as dire as it's made out to be, but in hopes that it isn't, how can we look forward to and work for a better outcome?
I don't know yet. The short answer, right? Because we don't know how we're going to be operating in November or in, you know, September, October, November, like what things are going to look like and what mechanisms. You know, folks really got into the Postcard program for the last election. I imagine there'll be something like that again. I know the pro-choice organizations are doing a lot of, you know, targeted work, getting volunteers focused on important districts. So I think that we'll see as we get into the summertime and people start to contemplate the November election, I think we'll start to see opportunities like that, whether it's the Postcards to Voters efforts again, or you know, being able to go back to a more traditional adopt a district, take people up to Wisconsin kind of efforts, or maybe both, you know, back to that, like people liked having the ability to participate when they could, you know, anyway, so we could see an adoption of a both approach.
I like that answer. And I'm also
Katy, well, I can.
What? Are you interrupting me?
No, I was just going to say, I don't know if you were going to ask it or I am. No, it's the highlighted question on our script.
No, I'm going to ask her a different one.
Okay, go ahead. I'll ask you when you're done.
Okay, just in reference to what she just said, the out-of-state question. I'm just curious because I've done a lot of out-of-state work in the past 10 years. You know, starting even before that for Obama, but specifically for various races in other states because we're okay in Illinois in certain years. My question this year is going to be, how do we get to know from other states' campaigns and activists which races the voters in that state don't want to hear from somebody from Chicago calling them? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because some of the volunteers,
I don't know that I have an answer to that.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know, it's tough, you know, especially, you know, like you said, if you're calling into southern states and you sound like a bunch of Yankees, you're probably not going to be helping.
Yeah.
So, you know, my hope is that, you know, from the national level, there'll be some smarter coordination around that.
Yeah, I hope so too. Go ahead.
And now I would like that. Am I correct that the primary is in June? And then how do people register to vote and when must they do it by? Because on some of the petitions I was passing around to a few friends and neighbors, some people hadn't changed their voter registration from other districts.
So a couple of things, and I wish I had known because I would have had the dates in front of me, and I don't have them in front of me on top of mine.
Yeah.
Okay. So the primary is in June. It's June 28th. Folks who need to change their registration can go online to the Chicago Board of Elections and get it done very, very simply. We also, like, we've got motor voter forms that we can use for folks too. So if folks would rather use a piece of paper, you know, those are available to anybody who's got petitions. I can give those sheets out as well.
Yeah. Right. And it's usually, Michael, the deadline is usually a couple of weeks to a month before the actual voting day. And there's also,
and keep in mind, we also have same day registration in Illinois. So even if someone hasn't, if someone has, you know, if they missed the deadline, which means the deadline is really for you to appear on the rolls and not have to jump through any hoops to vote on that day. So you can do that. And if you miss that deadline, you can go to any early voting location or your polling place and present your identification to register to vote. So you can do your registration and then you can vote.
Well, I think we're running out of time here. Is that right, Michael James?
You certainly are. I could give you the exact time in just a second.
No. Keep that to yourself. That's like, you know, it's like watching the legislation being made. You don't do that on air. We want to say thank you to Kelly Cassidy for coming on again and informing us, and good luck with the endorsement session. I'll see you online with that later today.
Awesome.
And yeah,
we may do another pop-up this weekend. So watch my social media. Waiting on confirmation on a new approach, which would involve mass texting to registered voters surrounding the event. So I'm experimenting with the technology. If it works, we'll announce it. If not, we'll put it off.
Okay, sister. Thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
soon.
y'all.
Thank you, babe. Have a great day.
Have a great trip.
Thank you. You are listening to Live from the Heartland. And let's see if we've got anything left over from the big top that we wanted to say, Michael. I think we have sports to get through.
We could do a little sports. Basically, I've got a bunch of things listed here. I like to say that, you know, when we read newspapers, we'd go to the back of the paper. And so we're going to pretend we're going to the back of the paper. Things that caught my attention on the sports front were the soccer fan rush, crush, and death during the Africa Cup in, I think, Cameroon. And that's too bad. I think 30 people died. Baseball's Hall of Fame had votes again. And Big Papi from Boston got in, but Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and a number of other people who are tainted by steroids once again did not get in on their final try.
Who did you say got in? Big Papi?
Yeah.
Who's that?
I'm blocking his last name because I have short-term memory loss, but he plays for Boston.
Okay.
And thanks for messing it up, Kate.
Sorry.
And it'll come to me as soon as I'm done.
Okay, sure.
And we are witnessing in football the emergence of like younger players and really some outstanding quarterbacks. The most exciting football game I ever watched was last week, where Allen from the Buffalo Bills and Mahomes from Kansas City scored a bunch of touchdowns in the last 2 minutes went back and forth. It was unbelievable. But with this week, we have, this will be on Sunday, Mahomes versus Burrows. That's Kansas City versus Cincinnati. And what else? I just wanted to say that Aaron Rodgers, the Wisconsin state legislature has said that no critical Rodgers theory can be taught in schools. And I got that from someone on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
In memoriam front, when I first came to Uptown back in '65, Joint Community Union was, there was a guy named Peter Friedman. And I've been in touch with him over the last few years. He's worked on healthcare a lot. He had cancer. He's in a lot of pain. And he announced publicly that he was going to take his own life. It's legal to do so in Oregon. And he did it. He did great work in the world. Thank you, Peter Friedman, for all you did. And on the musical front, Fred Paris, the creator of the doo-wop classic In the Still of the Night, who came out of New Haven, Connecticut with the Five Satins, he has passed away. And it brought back all these memories of junior high football when we'd be in the shower trying to avoid people with analgesic balm trying to get it to us in the wrong places. And we would sing In the Still of the Night.
Oh,
Doo
gosh.
doop and dooby doo. And we're going to go out with that after you give us the going out information.
Going out information. Yes, thank you for listening to Live from the Heartland, now called Heartland at Home, since we are at home. We are broadcast every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Central, Chicago's WLUW 88.7 FM. It also streams live from WLUW.org. And we are archived on our channel at youtube.com/Heartland Media. I'm not going to go into all the Channel 27 stuff because I just don't know it. Thanks to our Live from the Heartland team, Lynn Orman Weiss, the great folks at WLUW, including podcast director Gwen Brown. And as always, we got to say hello to Luis Mejia Aarons. Luis, if I wind up testing positive before and I can't leave Cancun, I'm calling you, baby. I'm calling you. I'm staying in Mexico. All right. So do good in the world.
Because the world needs all the good that we do.
All power.
All power to the
to the
people.
people.
See you next week.
Peace out, people.